The shotgun blast punched through the ceiling of Denny's Fork Diner, like the fist of something that had run out of patience. Plaster came down in chunks, landed in cold coffee, in half-eaten pie on the linoleum floor that Dottie Mercer had mopped 3 times that shift, because the night crowd always tracked in more of the desert than they realized. The echo of it bounced off the walls in the low ceiling and came back smaller, emptier, the way echoes always do, as if the sound had spent itself and had nothing left. In the back corner at table 14, 4 men had not moved. Not one of them had flinched. Not one had put down a coffee cup. The oldest of them, the one with gray at his temples and hands that looked like they had been formed by 40 years of physical work, rather than groan, simply looked toward the door with the expression of a man who has been in loud rooms before and knows the difference between noise and consequence. His name was Dale Carver. He was 56 years old. He was the charter president of the Iron Covenant Motorcycle Club, 89 members strong, and he had learned a long time ago that stillness, real stillness, the kind that came from inside rather than from fear, was its own form of authority. He set his coffee cup down, slowly, deliberately, in the way of a man who wanted you to notice that he was not afraid of you. Wyatt Briggs did not see any of this clearly yet. He had been awake for 41 hours, and his vision had that particular quality that long sleeplessness produces, a shimmering at the edges of things, a slight unreality to shapes and distances, as if the world were a photograph that had been slightly overexposed. He had the revolver up his arm extended, and he was shouting words that came out of him on pure momentum, on the desperate energy of a man who has committed to a direction and cannot stop. Now cannot afford to stop, cannot afford to think. On the ground, everybody on the ground right now, do not look at me. Do not you look at me. He swept the revolver across the room. The woman behind the counter, both hands pressed flat on the surface mascara already running. The man at table 9 in the rumpled gray suit who had gone from dead sleep to sitting upright in a single second, and whose hands were rising with the slow uncertainty of a man not yet sure what procedure applied to this situation. The empty booths along the wall, and then the dark back corner table 14, where the light was low, and 4 men sat with their coffee and their onion rings and their absolute refusal to participate in the terror Wyatt was trying to manufacture. Hey, he shouted it, and his voice cracked on the single syllable, and he hated that. He hated it with an intensity that was completely disproportionate to the moment, except that the moment was everything, and the crack in his voice was the sound of everything coming apart. I said, get on the floor. All of you. Now. None of them moved. The oldest one looked at him. Not through him, not past him. At him. The way you look at something you have seen before in one form or another and recognize even in a new configuration, Sundale Carver said. His voice was low and unhurried, carrying across the diner the way voices carry in rooms where everything has gone very quiet. You are going to want to think carefully about what you just walked into. Wyatt Briggs was 31 years old and had not slept in 41 hours and had $11.43 in his wallet, and a sister named Rose who was 34 years old and needed 3 dialysis treatments per week to stay alive, and whose account at the Inland Valley Kidney Care Center was 6 weeks past due, and whose discharge notice had arrived by certified mail that morning in an envelope that Wyatt had held in both hands for a long time before he understood what he was reading. His name in his sister's mouth was an anchor. Rose. The single syllable of her name was the only thing he had been holding on to for the last 41 hours, and he held it now against the sound of his voice cracking and the 4 men who would not lie down. Shut up, he said. Just everybody shut up and nobody gets hurt. That was not entirely true. The plan, such as it was, had been Seth Holden's plan. Seth was 28 years old and had the kind of open, slightly soft face that made people trust him on instinct, the kind of face that said, ask me for directions, I will help you, which was what had made him useful in certain situations and what had gotten him into this particular situation when a man named Danny Sloan had extended him what he called professional courtesy, and what was in fact a loan at rates that made the math arrive at catastrophe on a fixed timeline. Seth had come to Wyatt 3 days ago with the numbers and the plan and the absolute conviction that they were out of options, which Wyatt, in his exhaustion and his fear and his grief for Rose and his particular talent for not examining things he did not want to examine, had agreed to. What Wyatt had not agreed to, what Seth had not told him, was the full shape of the debt. Seth had said $8,000. Seth had said that once. And Wyatt had heard it and done the math against the $4,200 that would keep Rose on the dialysis machine for another 6 months, and the numbers had not added up to anything good, but they had added up to something that felt like action, and action was the only thing that had felt possible. He did not know, standing here now with the revolver in his hand and the plaster dust still settling from the ceiling, that the number was not 8,000. He did not know that yet. He would know it later, and it would land differently than anything else that happened tonight, which was saying something. Seth was at the register now, shotgun pressed against the counter, edge voice muffled by the bandana. "Open it. Open the register right now. I need you to open it." "I'm trying," the woman said. Her name was Dottie Mercer, 53 years old, 22 years behind this counter on this stretch of Interstate 40, and she was pressing the wrong button because her hands would not stop shaking, and she knew she was pressing the wrong button, but could not make her hands remember the right one. "Honey, just give me 1 second. I'm going." Dale Carver from the back booth said quietly, almost murmuring, "Colt, count." And the man sitting beside him, thick-armed, bearded, with a scar along his left jawline that had the particular quality of something old and finished, said in a voice so flat it registered like data rather than speech. 4. 2 active 2 in the lot. Weapons, 1 Mossberg pump, 1 revolver frame, crack on the cylinder. Saw it when he came through the door. Man holding it has his thumb over the hammer. Has not cocked it. Does not know he needs to. Wyatt's blood went cold. He did not understand all of it, but he understood enough. "What did you just say?" Dale Carver looked at him. He said, "Son, you do not know how to use that gun." The word again, son, patient, almost gentle, which was somehow worse than anger, would have been worse than anything threatening, because it carried in it the particular weight of a man who is not performing calm, but simply has it, who has been in enough rooms like this one to have metabolized the fear into something steadier. That revolver, Dale continued, is double action. You pull the trigger, it fires itself, but you have got your thumb over the hammer. You are holding it like you intend to cock it manually, and you have not done that. Which means when you pull that trigger, the hammer is going to catch on your thumb, and the gun is going to misfire, and what happens after that is going to be very bad for you in ways that have nothing to do with us. Silence. "I am not your enemy," Dale said. "I am telling you the truth." "Everybody shut up," Wyatt screamed. His voice was not cracking now. It was breaking, which was different, which was the sound of something structural in him giving way under a weight that had been building for weeks and months and years. Seth had the register open. He was sweeping bills into the canvas bag with one arm and keeping the Mossberg level with the other and talking to himself under his breath in the way he always did when he was scared. "Come on, come on, come on," almost done. At table 9, the man in the gray suit, Gerald Hammond, who sold pharmaceuticals for a living and had driven 11 hours from Phoenix and had let his body decide unilaterally that table 9 at Denny's Fork Diner was an acceptable place to lose consciousness, had slowly lowered himself from his chair to the floor and was lying with his arms over his head and his eyes squeezed shut and whispering something that was probably his wife's name. His brochures had scattered across the linoleum glossy photographs of smiling people who had nothing to do with this, and the sheer ordinary irrelevance of them, all those cheerful faces on the floor next to this terrified man, hit Wyatt somewhere in the chest like something physical. "This is what you are doing," something inside him said. "You are doing this to people." He shook it off, could not afford it, not now. 5 minutes, Seth called from the register. "We're almost done, almost there." "Stop," said a voice from the back booth. Not Dale this time. The other one, the thick-armed one with the scar. Colt Weaver said that single word in a tone so flat and absolute that it landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water, and Seth's hands froze over the register bag for a full second before he caught himself. "Don't stop," Wyatt shouted. "Don't you listen to him, Seth. Keep going." "Yeah," Seth said, but his voice had thinned. "Yeah, okay, yeah." Dale Carver leaned forward on the table. "Just slightly, just enough. Last time I'm going to say this to you. You need to put those weapons down, step back, and walk out that door right now before this becomes something none of us can put back together." "We are not going anywhere until we are done," Wyatt said. "You are already done," Dale said. And something in the way he said it, not as a threat, not with performance, just as a statement of fact in the same voice you'd use to tell someone the road was closed made Wyatt's hands start to shake. What Wyatt Briggs did not know, standing in the middle of Denny's Fork Diner with a cracked revolver and 41 hours of sleeplessness in a stomach that had stopped asking for food sometime yesterday, was that Dale Carver had been in rooms exactly like this one before, not similar rooms. This precise room, the room where a desperate man stands between two possible versions of the rest of his life and cannot see either one clearly. He did not know that Finn Blackwood, who had barely moved and barely spoken, had spent 6 years as a Navy corpsman and had a particular understanding of human bodies and the specific ways they broke down under stress that made him at this moment the most quietly dangerous person in the county. He did not know that Knox Steele, sitting with his jaw set and his eyes moving in that constant cataloging sweep that had long since stopped, feeling like a choice, had already under the table in the dark calculated the position of every piece of furniture, every foot of distance between himself and the two men with weapons, and had assembled a sequence of movements in his mind that he had been running through on a loop for the past 90 seconds. What Wyatt knew, the revolver, the crack in the cylinder that he had noticed 2 days ago and chosen not to think about since. Rose, 34 years old, who had never asked him for a single thing in her life and whose dialysis machine cost money that did not exist. And the flat fact that he had been awake for 41 hours and made a decision that had felt like the only decision available and now stood inside the consequences of that decision with no clear way out. Then Seth did something stupid. Seth Holden did not think of it as stupid. What Seth thought was that the 4 men in the back corner were not scared enough that control required their fear, and that walking toward them with a shotgun was the way to produce it. What Seth did was he left the register, crossed the diner, and pressed the barrel of the Mossberg against the table edge directly in front of Dale Carver's coffee cup. On the ground, Seth said, "All 4 of you, right now, I'm not asking again." Dale Carver looked at the barrel of the Mossberg. He looked at it the way a man looks at something familiar he has long since stopped being intimidated by. Then he looked up at Seth. "You ever hunt?" Dale asked. Seth blinked. "What? Deer, elk, anything like that." What does that have to do with anything? Because Dale said a man who hunts knows something important about animals. He knows which ones are dangerous when they are cornered, and he learns very quickly not to corner them. "I have a 12 gauge pointed at your face," Seth said. "I know," Dale said. His voice had not changed at all. Not in volume, not in speed, not in any quality that suggested he was talking about something other than the weather. "Then why aren't you scared?" Dale was quiet for just a moment. "Son," he said, "I am very, very calm, which is not the same thing as not scared. It means I have been in enough rooms like this one to know exactly what happens next. And I am giving you the chance right now, this second, to make a different choice." Seth looked at him. Something moved behind his eyes, something that might have been the beginning of understanding or the beginning of doubt, which sometimes look identical from the outside. And then Finn Blackwood's hand came up from under the table. What happened next took 4 seconds. Finn Blackwood moved with the economy of a man who had learned that speed without precision was just noise. He did not lunge, he did not shout. His left hand found the barrel of the Mossberg and redirected it, not snatching, redirecting upward and to the left, so that when Seth's finger tightened on the trigger by reflex, the blast went into the ceiling for the second time that night. His right arm came across the table in one continuous motion. Seth went down, hard and fast. The Mossberg skidded across the linoleum. Seth Holden, who had thought of himself as the one holding the power in this room, found himself face down on the floor, with his arm at an angle it was not designed to achieve, and a pain that was white and total, and that took away his ability to form words. Wyatt spun. Seth, Knox Steele, was already moving. He had been out of the booth before Finn's hand cleared the table edge. He moved not at Wyatt but around him, cutting off the angle to the door, because the door was the problem. Because the door was where this stopped being a diner robbery and started being something that required state police and arrest records and futures permanently altered. "Put it down," Knox said. He was 3 feet from Wyatt. His arms were loose at his sides and his weight was balanced, and his eyes were on Wyatt's, and there was nothing in his expression that was unkind. That was the thing. That was the thing Wyatt would carry with him out of this room and into everything that came after. Knox Steele's voice in that moment was not unkind. "I'll shoot," Wyatt said. "I will. I'll shoot you right now." "I know you will," Knox said. "And you might even hit me. But that thumb is going to catch, and you are going to lose half a second, and I have got 3 feet of ground, and I have been awake longer than you think, and it is not going to go the way you need it to go. Wyatt's chest was heaving. He could hear Seth on the floor making a sound that was somewhere between crying and not crying, something in between. He could hear Dottie behind the counter saying very softly, "Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy," like a rosary. He could hear Gerald Hammond's pharmaceutical brochures rustling on the linoleum as the air conditioning cycled on. And behind him from the booth, he could hear Dale Carver's voice quiet and level as a carpenter's rule. "It's over, son. The only question left is what kind of over it is going to be." Wyatt stood there. The revolver was still up. His thumb was still over the hammer. The crack in the cylinder was a physical fact he could not stop knowing. Rose was a name. Rose was 34 years old and 3 dialysis sessions per week and $4,200 and a discharge notice on certified mail, and the only family Wyatt Briggs had left in the world. "My sister," Wyatt said. He had not meant to say it. It came out before he could stop it, the way things come out when you have been holding them too long and something structural finally lets go. "My sister needs—" His voice broke, steadied, continued. "She needs dialysis 3 times a week, and the money is—" He stopped, swallowed. I did not know what else to do. Knox did not move, did not use the moment. He stood 3 feet away with his hands open at his sides and his weight balanced, and he looked at Wyatt with the particular attention of a man who has heard this kind of thing before and knows how much it costs to say it. "What is her name?" Knox said. Wyatt stared at him. "What? Your sister. What is her name?" The question was so completely outside the architecture of what Wyatt had expected that for 3 full seconds he stood with the revolver still up and his mouth slightly open and the world slightly tilted on whatever axis it had been tilting on for the last 41 hours. "Rose," he said. "Her name is Rose." Knox Steele nodded slowly. Like that mattered. Like the name itself was important information. "Rose," he said. "And then my mother was on dialysis for 6 years before she died. Machine 3 times a week, exactly like you said. I know what that costs. I know what watching that does to a person every single time." Silence. Complete and total silence in the diner, the refrigeration units, the distant highway traffic, and nothing else. From the booth, Dale Carver had not moved and had not spoken. He was watching the room the way experienced men watch rooms, reading what needed to be read and giving space for what needed space. "I am not going to tell you what you did tonight was right," Knox continued, "because it was not, and you already know that. I can see in your face that you know that. But I understand why a man arrives at the place you are in tonight. I have been somewhere near it. I understand what it does to you." Wyatt's arm lowered. "Not all the way. An inch, 2 inches. "Then help me," Wyatt said, and his voice was suddenly young in a way that had nothing to do with age. Young and afraid and past the point of pretending. "Help me, please. Help me figure out what to do, because I do not know what to do anymore. I have been trying to figure it out for 6 weeks and I am out of road." Knox Hayes looked at him for a long moment. "Yeah," he said softly. "Okay, let's start with the gun." And Wyatt Briggs, would-be thief, terrified, older brother, man who had driven into the worst night of his life, on 41 hours of no sleep, in a cracked cylinder, in a plan that had never been a real plan, slowly and carefully set the revolver on the nearest table. The crack in the cylinder made a small sound when it landed on the formica. Nobody said anything. Outside, the Mojave wind moved through the parking lot, rattling the chains on the motorcycles near the entrance. In the back booth of Denny's Fork Diner, Dale Carver picked up his coffee cup. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway. The revolver sat on the formica table like a confession. Wyatt stared at his own hand, still in the shape of holding something. Fingers slightly curved, and it took his brain 3 full seconds to understand what his body had just done. He had put it down. He had actually put it down. Seth was still on the floor. "Hey," Wyatt said. His voice came out too thin. "Seth, talk to me." A sound from the floor that was part groan and part something else entirely. "My arm," Seth managed. "I think my arm is—" "It is not broken," Finn Blackwood said from where he had settled back against the booth. His voice carried the flat certainty of a man who had assessed this particular injury many times before. "Dislocated possibly. Hurts like broken. It is not." Seth lifted his face from the linoleum. His bandana had come down around his chin. His face was red and wet and furious. He looked at Finn. He looked at Wyatt. He looked at the Mossberg on the floor 11 feet away. And Wyatt watched Seth do the math and come up short. Don't, Wyatt said quietly. I wasn't, Seth said. He was lying. They both knew it. He stayed on the floor. Knox had not moved from his position near the door. He stood with his arms loose and his weight balanced, and his eyes moving in that constant, systematic sweep that had the quality of something practiced into reflex. Wyatt had looked into those eyes now and understood something he had not understood before about the difference between a man who was dangerous because he was angry and a man who was dangerous because he was trained and had decided exactly where the lines were. Dottie Dale called toward the counter. Dottie Mercer raised her head. Her mascara had run. Her hands were still pressed flat on the counter, and she was breathing in the deliberate way of a person who has decided that controlled breathing is all that stands between her and something she cannot afford right now. She had worked this counter for 22 years. She had seen accidents and arguments in one marriage proposal that had ended in tears. She had not seen this before. You okay, Dale asked. I have been better, Dottie said. Then almost despite herself, I have also been worse. Dale made a sound that might have been a laugh, quiet and genuine. There is a first aid kit under the counter, he said. You mind getting it? Dottie looked at him, looked at Wyatt, looked at Seth on the floor. Then without another word, she reached under the counter and set the kit on top. That was the moment Wyatt understood that something had fundamentally shifted. The robbery, if it had ever been a robbery, if it had ever been anything other than two men running out of road and making the worst decision available to them, was over. Something else had started. He did not have a name for it yet, but he could feel it beginning, the way you feel weather changing before you can see the clouds. Sit down, Dale said to Wyatt, not in command, not sharp, in the same tone you'd use to tell someone who had been standing for too long to rest. Wyatt looked at the nearest chair. He sat down, and the simple physical act of placing his weight in a chair, the most ordinary human thing, broke something open in his chest that he had been holding together with adrenaline for 41 hours. He put his face in his hands and breathed and did not cry, but came close enough that the difference was entirely technical. First time, Dale asked. Wyatt looked up. What? First time doing something like this. Wyatt nodded. Thought so, Dale said. He did not say it with contempt. He said it the way you'd note the temperature observationally without judgment. You did everything wrong. You want to know the first thing you did wrong? Not really, Wyatt said. You picked a diner, Dale said. A diner on an interstate at night is a truck stop that serves food. You know who stuffs at truck stops? People who drive alone for a living, which means they are comfortable with long stretches of silence and isolation and the specific kind of patience that comes from spending your life waiting for something to happen. You walk into a diner with a gun, you are not walking into a room full of people who have never been in trouble. You are walking into a room full of people who have spent their lives managing unexpected situations. Wyatt stared at him. You are telling me how to do this better, he said. I am telling you why this was always going to end the way it ended, Dale said. So that you understand it was not bad luck. It was the plan itself. Colt Weaver had gotten up from the booth and was crouched next to Seth, examining the shoulder joint with the impersonal efficiency of a man assessing a mechanical problem that he already knows the solution to. Rotate it for me, Colt said. Slow. Don't touch me, Seth said. Your choice, Colt said. Hurts less if I fix it, but your choice. Seth stared at him. Colt's face gave him nothing. No threat, no sympathy, just the patient expression of a man willing to wait as long as necessary for you to arrive at the obvious conclusion. Seth's jaw moved. His pride and his pain wrestled briefly, and pain won. Fine, Seth said. Fine, do it. Colt were quitawaken. There was a sound from Seth that he would have been embarrassed about under other circumstances. Then Colt said, done, and Seth sat up and moved his arm, and the look on his face was pure disbelief. That is it, Seth said. Told you, Colt said, and went back to the booth. Seth sat on the floor and opened and closed his hands, staring at his own fingers like they were unfamiliar. Then he looked up at Wyatt, and something moved across his face that Wyatt had not seen there in a long time. The beginning of something recalibrating, a man starting to measure things against a different standard. Wyatt, Seth said quietly. What is happening right now? I genuinely do not know, Wyatt said. Dale reached it into his jacket pocket. Wyatt tensed from reflex, useless now. What Dale produced was a phone. He looked at it for a moment, something scrolling through his thumb, then set it face down on the table. Here is what is going to happen, Dale said. We are going to have a real conversation, and then some decisions are going to get made. And those decisions are going to determine how the rest of your night goes and a significant portion of how the rest of your life goes. So I am asking you both to be straight with me. Can you do that? Wyatt looked at Dale. Yeah, he said. Okay. Why tonight? Dale asked. Real answer. I told you. My sister. I heard you. I am asking why tonight specifically. You did not just wake up this morning and decide to do this. Something happened. Wyatt was quiet for a moment. He was 41 hours past the point where lying required energy he did not have. The dialysis center called yesterday morning, he said. Rose is 6 weeks behind on payments. They said if she misses another cycle, they are going to have to discharge her. And without the machine, 3 times a week, he stopped. She dies. It is not complicated. It is just a matter of time. The diner was very quiet. Gerald Hammond had managed to get himself back into his chair at table 9. Both hands wrapped around the coffee cup that Dottie had silently refilled. He was listening with the expression of a man who had just been required to completely reclassify what kind of night this was. How much? Dale said. What? How much does she owe? Wyatt blinked. Why are you asking that? Just answer the question. $4,200, Wyatt said. The number tasted like something rotting in his mouth. $4,200, and they keep her on the machine. $4,200, and she gets to keep being alive. Dale was quiet. Colt said nothing. Finn said nothing. Knox, still near the door, had gone still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. Something happening behind those eyes. We got $268 from the register, Seth said suddenly. His voice was flat. He was not looking at anyone. I counted it while I was sweeping it. 268. Nobody responded to that directly. The distance between $268 and $4,200 hung in the air of the diner like something physical, like weather. You did not get close, Dale said. Not a cruelty, just a fact. No, Wyatt said. No, we did not. He laughed. It was a short, broken sound with nothing in it that resembled humor. It was just the sound a person makes when the mathematics of their situation reaches such a pitch of absurdity that the body has to release something or implode. $268. He had destroyed his life and Seth's life and terrified a diner full of people and crossed a line he could never uncross for $268, which was approximately 6% of what Rose needed. God, Wyatt said, and put his face back in his hands. Hey, Knox's voice from near the door, steady and unperformed. Look at me. Wyatt looked up. That feeling you have right now, Knox said. That is not the end. That is what rock bottom looks like from the inside when you are in it. I am telling you from personal experience that feeling means something. Most people never actually arrive there. They spend their whole lives skirting the edges and never hitting the floor. You hit the floor tonight, and that means you have got something to push off of. Nothing you can push off of from the edges. Seth was staring at Knox now from his place on the floor. That is either the most useful thing anyone has ever said to me, Seth said slowly, or I have a serious concussion. Probably both, Finn said from the booth. Dottie made a sound behind the counter. It took Wyatt a moment to realize it was a laugh. And there was a moment then, brief as a camera flash, where Denny's Fork Diner on Interstate 40 was just a diner and the people in it were just people, and the fluorescent lights and the burnt coffee smell and the scuffed linoleum were simply what they were, and nothing more terrible than that. Then Dale Carver picked up his phone. I need to make a call, he said. While I do that, Knox is going to sit with you. You are going to stay where you are, and you are not going to make any moves that I am going to have to regret. Are we clear? Who are you calling? Wyatt asked. Someone who can help, Dale said. Maybe the police, Seth said sharply. Dale looked at him. Do you think if I was calling the police, I would be telling you I was calling someone? Seth thought about this. Fair point, he said. Dale walked to the far end of the diner near the windows and made his call. Wyatt could see his face in profile, composed and serious, the words too low to hear. The call lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a long time when you are sitting at a Formica table in a diner in Barstow with a dislocated shoulder and a cracked revolver, and the rest of your life balanced on a phone call you cannot hear. Seth leaned toward Wyatt. What do you think he is doing? He murmured. I do not know, Wyatt said. Should we run? Wyatt looked at Knox, who was leaning against the wall beside the door with his arms crossed and his eyes open and giving no indication that he had heard, but who also had not moved from the one position in the room that made running structurally impossible. No, Wyatt said. We should not run. Seth rubbed his shoulder. I do not like this. Seth, Wyatt said. 4 hours ago, we were in your truck, eating gas station sandwiches and planning to rob a diner with 3 bullets and a shotgun we got from a pawn shop. Our judgment is clearly not the asset here. Seth sat with this. That is fair, he said. Dottie came around from behind the counter. She walked to Gerald Hammond's table and refilled his coffee without asking. Then she walked to Wyatt's table and set a cup in front of him. Then after a pause that was full of something complicated and unresolved, she walked to where Seth was sitting on the floor and set a cup on the table next to him. Seth stared at it. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Dottie said. I am not doing it because you deserve it. I am doing it because I have been on my feet since 3 in the afternoon and my back is killing me. And this is the only thing right now that makes sense to do with my hands. She went back behind the counter. Seth picked up the cup with his good arm and drank. Dale came back from the windows. He stood at the head of the table and looked at both of them for a long moment. Something in his face had shifted. Nothing dramatic, nothing specific he could name, but something in his expression had moved the way weather moves when the wind has decided on a direction. All right, Dale said. I talked to some people. Here is where we are. He pulled out the chair across from Wyatt and sat down. The man I called Dale said his name does not matter right now. What matters is that he has reach. He has the kind of connections that can make certain things move quickly when they need to move. Now, I want you to understand something before I say what I am going to say next. Okay, Wyatt said. What you did tonight does not get erased, Dale said. You understand that. There is no version of tonight where it did not happen. Dottie was scared. That man was scared. He nodded toward Gerald Hammond. You came in here with weapons and you put fear into people, and that is real and it matters, and it does not disappear because you put the gun down. I know, Wyatt said. Good. Say it like you mean it. I know what I did, Wyatt said. I am not trying to make it okay. Dale looked at him for 3 seconds. All right, he said. The cash from the register goes back in the register. All of it. Right now. Seth picked up the canvas bag from the floor beside him and held it out toward Dottie. Dottie came around the counter and took it and opened the register and counted the bills back into their slots, her lips moving. 263, she said. 5 short. Bobby Colt called from the booth. Seth reached into his jacket pocket and produced a crumpled 5. He held it up. He looked genuinely mortified. It fell out when I was counting, he said. Dottie took the 5. 268, she said. We are square. Dottie, Dale said, before I leave tonight, you are going to get a number from me. Man named Arthur. He does repair work. Good work, fair prices. The ceiling gets fixed. The door frame gets fixed. It gets done at no cost to you or to this place. You have my word on that. Brenda looked at him. Something was working in her expression, a recalibration that Wyatt recognized because he had been going through his own version of it for the last half hour. The adjustment that happens when the world turns out to be organized differently than you assumed. Your word, Dottie repeated. My word, Dale said. Dottie nodded once firmly. Then I will take it, she said. Dale turned back to Wyatt. The dialysis center your sister uses, what is the name of it? Wyatt went still. Why? Because I am going to make a call in the morning, Dale said simply to the director. And I am going to explain that a friend of mine has a family situation that requires some flexibility and some goodwill. And I am going to ask them as a professional courtesy to work out a payment arrangement that keeps your sister on that machine. The room was completely silent. Wyatt stared at him. That is not, you cannot just, why would you do that? Why would anyone do that? Because I have a sister too, Dale said. And he said it the way you say things that are simply and completely true and do not require any decoration. And because I have been in a room where someone made a choice to help instead of hurt, and it changed the entire shape of what came after. And because the way I figure it, the only thing that has ever actually changed anything in this world is when somebody decides to be the first one to do the right thing, even when they do not have to. Wyatt's throat was tight. Seth on the floor had stopped drinking his coffee. He was holding the cup in both hands, good arm and bad arm, both gripping it like it was the only solid thing available, and looking at Dale Carver with an expression that Wyatt had never seen on Seth's face before. The expression of a man discovering in real time that the world is not put together the way he thought it was. There are conditions, Dale said. I figured, Wyatt said. First, you are going to give me your sister's name and the name of the dialysis center, and you are going to call her tonight from this diner, and you are going to tell her what happened. Not a version of it. What happened. Wyatt's stomach dropped. She will. I know what she will do, Dale said. That is the point. She needs to know. You need her to know. The truth is the only thing that ever gets any traction. Wyatt was quiet. Second condition, Dale said. Both of you come back here tomorrow, 10 in the morning. You spend 4 hours fixing what you broke and cleaning what you dirtied and doing whatever Dottie tells you to do without complaint or attitude. Yeah, Wyatt said immediately. Yes, absolutely, Dale said. Seth looked up. Yeah, he said. And then more quietly, yeah, I will be here. Dale nodded. Third condition. He paused. Wyatt waited. You are going to figure out what your life looks like going forward, Dale said, and you are going to build it in a direction that does not lead back to a room like this one. I am not your father, and I am not your parole officer. I am not going to tell you what that looks like, but you are going to figure it out. And if you do not, if I hear that something like tonight happened again, none of the rest of this matters. Are we clear? Crystal, Wyatt said. Clear, Seth said. Dale stood. He straightened his jacket. He picked up his coffee cup cold for the second time and carried it to the counter and set it down in front of Dottie. I'm sorry about your night, he said to her. Honey, Dottie said that the tiredness that had somewhere in the last hour turned into something less brittle and more solid. I am going to be telling this story until the day I die. Dale smiled. It was real. He walked back to the booth. Colt was already shrugging into his jacket. Finn was standing rolling his neck. Knox had moved from the door and was picking up his jacket from the booth seat. They moved with the easy coordination of men who had done a great many things together over a great many years and needed very few words to do any of them. Knox, Wyatt said. Knox looked over. What you said before, about rock bottom. He stopped, tried to find the right words. Did someone say that to you when you were at yours? Knox thought about it for a moment. No, he said. Nobody said it to me. Wish they had. Might have saved me about 8 years. He put on his jacket. Wyatt watched them button up and pay Dale, leaving twice what the tab was without comment. And there was something in the ordinary human ritual of it that hit him somewhere specific. These were men who had walked into a situation that had nothing to do with them and had turned it into something other than what it would have been. Not with speeches, not with grand gestures, with patience and precision and the specific gravity of people who had decided a long time ago who they were and were not going to negotiate it away for the convenience of the moment. The door opened. Cold desert air came through. Dale paused on the threshold and looked back. His eyes found Wyatt's across the length of the diner. Call your sister, he said. The door closed. Wyatt sat in the silence of Denny's Fork Diner, the 2 shotgun holes in the ceiling, the plaster dust still settling, Dottie wiping down the counter, Gerald Hammond finishing his coffee, Seth on the floor rotating his shoulder with careful disbelief, the revolver on the Formica table like the period at the end of a sentence that had taken his whole life to write and that he was only now reading clearly. He picked up his phone, found Rose's name. His thumb hovered over it for 30 seconds. Then he pressed it. It rang twice. Leo Rose's voice came through sleep rough and immediately alert because Rose always knew, had always known the way sisters do when something had gone wrong. Leo, it is 2 in the morning. What happened? He had changed his name in the contacts, but never in her voice. It was always just him, just her brother, the only family left. Rose, he said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything. Can you do that? A pause. Yes, she said. And Wyatt Briggs began to tell the truth. Rose did not say anything for a long time after Wyatt finished. He had told her everything. The truck, the parking lot, the bandanas, the 2 shotgun blasts through the ceiling, the 4 men who had not moved, the revolver on the Formica table. The moment Knox Steele had said, put it down, and something in Wyatt had simply surrendered, not to Knox, not to Dale, but to the truth of his own exhaustion. He told her about Dale Carver and the phone call and the 3 conditions and the promise. And when he was done, the phone line between them was so quiet he thought for a moment it had dropped. Rose, he said, you still there? I am here, she said. Her voice was completely flat. The specific flatness that was not calm, but was the voice of a person running too many feelings simultaneously for any single one to surface. I just need a second. Take as long as you need. No, sharp. No, do not say that. You do not get to be gentle with me right now. Okay, Wyatt said. You took a gun into a diner. Not a question. Yes. You pointed it at people. Yes. For me. Her voice cracked on the last word. Just slightly. Just enough. You did this for me. Rose, don't. Her voice was fierce now, the flatness burned off by something raw and bright underneath it. Don't you dare make this sound like it was for me. Don't you dare. I never asked you to do this. You think I would rather have the dialysis money than have my brother out of prison? You think that is a trade I would make? Wyatt did not answer that. There was no answer to it that was not surrender. I thought I was out of options, he said finally. You always have options. You had my phone number. That is an option. You call me, you tell me how bad it is. We figure it out together. That is what we do. That is what people do. A pause. You are my brother, Rose said. You are the only family I have left. You carrying this alone, so I do not have to carry it, that is not protecting me. That is just you being alone when you did not have to be. Wyatt was quiet. The man who called Rose said, Dale Carver, he is actually going to help. He said he would, and you believe him. Wyatt thought about Dale's face, the patience in it, the absence of performance, the way he had said my word to Dottie and Dottie had simply taken it and moved on because some things you can hear is true before you can explain why. Yeah, Wyatt said, I believe him. Okay, Rose said slowly. Okay, then here's what you are going to do. You are going to go back tomorrow and do exactly what he said. Every single thing. You are going to clean that diner until it is cleaner than it was before you walked in. And then we are going to figure out what comes next. Together. But Wyatt, yeah. If you ever, she stopped, gathered herself. If you ever pick up a gun again, for any reason for me or for anyone, I will never speak to you again. I mean that. I know you mean it, Wyatt said. Good. A breath. I love you, you idiot. So much. Wyatt's throat closed. I love you too. Call me in the morning. She hung up. Wyatt set the phone on the table. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Seth. She okay? Seth asked. She is furious, Wyatt said. She is also the best person I have ever known. Seth nodded slowly. My mom is going to be the same way when I tell her. You're going to tell her. Mike said, tell the truth, Seth said. Besides, she always finds out anyway. It is basically a superpower. Gerald Hammond at some point in the last 15 minutes had quietly repacked his pharmaceutical brochures into his briefcase and straightened his tie and returned himself to something approximating a businessman at a diner table. He had not left. Wyatt was not sure why. Son, Gerald said. Wyatt looked at him. Gerald Hammond was maybe 55 with the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now simply deeply tired in a way that had settled permanently into the features. He had a wedding ring and a wallet open on the table with a photograph visible, 2 teenagers doing the school photo smile. I have a daughter, Gerald said. She is 20. She had a heart condition last year, surgery. The bills. He stopped, cleared his throat. I am not saying your situation is the same as mine. I am saying I understand the particular mathematics of medical debt, the way it changes what seems possible. Wyatt looked at him. I am not going to pretend tonight was not terrifying, Gerald said. Because it was. You pointed a weapon at me, and my brain went somewhere I do not want to revisit. He picked up his coffee. But I heard what you said about your sister, and He paused. Whatever he was about to say seemed to cost him something. I hope it works out for her. I genuinely do. Wyatt did not know what to say. I am sorry, he said finally, for scaring you specifically. I am sorry. Gerald nodded once. Yeah, he said, okay. He finished his coffee, closed his briefcase, stood, left enough money on the table to cover the meal twice over and walked toward the door. He stopped with his hand on it. Those men, Gerald said without turning. The ones who helped you. You know what they are, what club they belong to. I know, Wyatt said. Most people would have called the police, Gerald said, or done nothing, or made it worse. He was quiet for a moment. I've been driving this highway twice a month for 8 years. Stopped at this diner probably 100 times. He pushed the door open. I do not think I understood a single thing about this stretch of road until tonight. The door closed. Dottie watched him go. He always overtips, she said. Good man. Wyatt stood. His legs felt uncertain under him, the particular physical aftermath of adrenaline leaving a body that had been running on it too long. He picked up the revolver from the table. Dottie watched him without alarm, which said everything about how much the room had changed. He opened the cylinder, removed the 3 rounds, put them in his jacket pocket, and set the revolver on the counter in front of Dottie. I do not know what you do with that, he said. I just know I do not want to carry it out of here. Dottie looked at it. I will call the sheriff in the morning and have them pick it up. Tell them a customer left it. That is creative, Seth said. I have been doing this job for 22 years, Dottie said. You learn to be creative. She reached under the counter and produced a set of keys. There is a motel about a mile east on the frontage road. Sunrise Motor Lodge. Nothing fancy, but it is clean and the price is right. Terry Boone runs the night desk and he owes me more favors than I can count. I am going to call him and tell him you are coming and he is going to give you a room for the night at no charge. Wyatt stared at her. You do not have to do that. I know I do not have to, Dottie said with the particular energy of a woman who has made her decision and has no interest in discussing it further. You are coming back tomorrow at 10. You need to sleep somewhere between now and then. It makes practical sense. She called Terry. The call lasted 45 seconds. She hung up. Room 7, she said. Key is under the mat. Do not smoke inside. Corey had gotten himself off the floor. Seth had gotten himself off the floor. He was standing on his own, rotating the shoulder, carefully wincing at the residual ache. He picked up the canvas bag, which was empty. Now the money returned and dropped it in the trash can near the door. Dottie, Seth said. She looked at him. He stood with his mouth slightly open and his face doing complicated things, and the words he had apparently planned to say seemed to have gotten lost somewhere between intention and arrival. I am sorry, he said finally. I know that does not fix anything, but I mean it. Dottie looked at him for a long moment with the eyes of a woman who had been reading people across a diner counter for 2 decades and had developed an accuracy at it that she would have called paying attention rather than intuition. I know you do, she said. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, Seth said. They walked out. The parking lot hit them with cold desert air and a quiet that was enormous in the way that desert quiet is always enormous, full, rather than empty. The silence of a place that has seen everything and kept it. Wyatt stood for a moment and just breathed it. The Mojave at 2 in the morning smelled like dust and distance and something faintly mineral that he had always liked and never been able to name. He filled his lungs with it and let it out slowly and felt something in his chest that was not quite relief, but was adjacent to it, the first edge of something less heavy than the last 41 hours. The motorcycles were gone. Of course they were. Dale and his people had ridden out while Wyatt was on the phone with Rose, dissolving back into the highway, the way they had apparently arrived, without announcement, without ceremony. 4 men on 4 machines pointed west into the Mojave dark. They did not even say goodbye, Seth said. They do not seem like the goodbye type, Wyatt said. Seth was quiet. He was looking at the empty space where the bikes had been, and his face had the particular expression of a man trying to memorize something he does not fully understand yet. Wyatt, Seth said. Yeah, I need to tell you something. Seth's voice was different, stripped down to something Wyatt rarely heard from him, something without performance in it at all. There was a pause that lasted long enough to be deliberate. The debt, Seth said. It is not 8,000. Wyatt turned to look at him. It is 14,000, Seth said. I told you 8 because I knew you would not come if you knew the real number. And I needed you to come because I was scared, and you are the only person I have ever trusted when things get bad. He looked at his hands. I lied to you. I am sorry. I am telling you now because you just told your sister the whole truth about the worst thing you have ever done, and I figured I owed you the same. The parking lot was very quiet. The neon open sign in the diner window reflected in a puddle near Wyatt's boot. Wyatt said nothing for a long moment. Then who does Danny Sloan have people with him? I do not know, Seth said. At least 2, maybe more. Wyatt looked out at the highway, the headlights of a truck moving east. The stars above the Mojave improbable in number and brightness. We will deal with it in the morning, Wyatt said. They drove the mile to the Sunrise Motor Lodge. The key was under the mat of room 7 exactly as promised. The room was small and smelled of industrial cleaner and had a Bible in the nightstand drawer and a painting of a desert sunset on the wall that was probably intended to be inspirational and mostly just looked exhausted. It was the best room Wyatt had ever seen. He took his boots off and lay down on top of the covers in his clothes and stared at the ceiling. The ceiling stared back. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost did not answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But the same instinct that had made him put the gun down, the same thing that had been making better decisions than his conscious mind all night, made him pick up. Yeah, he said. Wyatt Briggs. Not a question. A man's voice low and even, carrying an authority that did not need volume. My name is Frank Donovan. Mr. Carver asked me to call you. Wyatt sat up. He tells me you are a man in a difficult situation who made a bad choice and then made a better one, Frank said. He believes that second choice matters. I hope he is right, Wyatt said. He is, Frank said. In my experience, the second choice is always the one that tells you who a person actually is. Anybody can fall. What you do when you are on the ground is what counts. Wyatt was quiet. He was listening with everything he had. Seth Holden, Frank said. He owes money. I know to whom. I know the amount. $14,000. Effective tonight, that debt is forgiven. Wyatt's mouth was dry. How do you? It does not matter how, Frank said. Not unkindly. What matters is that it is handled. Who are you, Wyatt said. A pause. Someone who has been where you are, Frank said. A long time ago. Let's leave it at that for now. And then the dialysis center. My office will contact their billing department when they open at 8 tomorrow morning. Your sister's account will be brought current. A 6-month arrangement will be set up. Manageable payments, nothing that should require anyone to pick up a weapon. Wyatt pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes. He was not going to cry on the phone with a man named Frank Donovan. He was simply not going to do that. I do not know what to say, Wyatt said. You do not need to say anything to me, Frank said. What you need to do is become the kind of man who makes the second call first. You understand what I mean by that? Yeah, Wyatt said. I think I do. Good. A pause. There is something else. Frank's voice was careful now, measured. When I said the debt is handled, I meant more than Seth's. There were 2 men in the parking lot of the Sunrise Motor Lodge tonight. They are no longer there. Do you understand what I am telling you? Wyatt went cold. Yes, he said. I understand. Get some sleep, Mr. Briggs. Tomorrow is a work day. The line went dead. Wyatt sat on the edge of the bed with the phone in his hand and the desert silence pressing against the walls of room 7 and thought about the shape of the last 4 hours. He thought about plaster raining down. He thought about Dale Carver drinking cold coffee with absolute deliberateness. He thought about Knox Steele saying rock bottom and meaning it in the specific way of someone who had stood there himself and navigated out. He thought about Dottie calling a man at 2 in the morning who owed her favors. He thought about Gerald Hammond's pharmaceutical brochures on the linoleum. He thought about Rose's voice, you are the only family I have left. He thought about Frank Donovan making problems dissolve in the dark because someone he trusted had asked him to. None of this is how the world is supposed to work, he thought. None of it matches the rules I've been living by. The rules that said you were alone, that nobody helped without an angle, that the only thing between you and disaster was your own nerve and your own calculation. And if those failed, you were finished. Those rules were wrong. He did not yet know what the right rules were. He suspected figuring that out would take longer than one night. But he knew with a certainty that was entirely new and entirely his own that the rules he had been operating under were simply completely and permanently wrong. The door to the next room opened and closed, Seth settling in. A minute later, a text from Seth's number. 3 words. You good, bro? Wyatt typed back, getting there. 3 dots. Disappeared, reappeared. Same. Hey, yeah, thanks for not running when I told you to in there. Wyatt read that twice. He put the phone on the nightstand. He closed his eyes. Outside on Interstate 40, a truck moved east through the dark with the low constant engine note of something that had somewhere to be and the patience to get there. The country circulation at 2 in the morning while everything slept or tried to. And somewhere 10 miles west on the shoulder of the same highway, Dale Carver had pulled his bike over and cut the engine and was sitting with the Mojave wind and the stars doing what stars do over the desert, which is exist in such numbers that a man feels simultaneously very small, and if he is in the right frame of mind, somehow clarified. Wyatt Briggs fell asleep in room 7 of the Sunrise Motor Lodge, with his boots off and his clothes on, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he did not dream about money. Wyatt woke at 7:43 and lay still for exactly 30 seconds, trying to place where he was. Then it came back. All of it into the order it had happened, which was also the order of damage. The parking lot, the diner, the ceiling, the 4 men who had not moved, the revolver on the Formica table, Dale Carver's voice saying, call your sister, Rose's voice breaking on the phone, Frank Donovan at 2 in the morning making problems dissolve from a distance, and Danny Sloan's men in the parking lot who, according to Frank, were no longer there. Wyatt sat up and looked at the window. The curtain was thin, and the morning was already bright behind it, that specific Mojave brightness that has no softness in it, just light arriving with its full intensity, and no apology. He got up and looked out through the gap in the curtain at the parking lot. Empty. A pickup he did not recognize at the far end. Two semis idling on the highway side. Nothing else. He washed his face with motel soap and stood at the mirror for a long moment, looking at the man looking back. The red around the eyes. The jaw that needed a razor. The face of a man who had stood at a specific edge the night before and stepped back from it and was now standing in the morning trying to understand what direction to walk. He called Rose. She picked up on the first ring. "You slept," she said. "Some," he said. "Rose," he said. "There is something else that happened last night after we hung up." He told her about Frank Donovan, the debt canceled, the billing department, the 6-month arrangement. He told it plainly the way he had promised himself he would speak from now on. Rose was quiet for a long time, long enough that the silence acquired weight. "Wyatt," she finally said, "who are these people?" "I do not fully know," he said. "I know they ride motorcycles and they drink bad coffee, and they made choices last night they did not have to make." "Are you safe?" "Yeah, Rose, I am safe." "Are you sure?" "I am sure." Another pause. When Rose spoke again, her voice had shifted from the fierce protective frequency to something quieter. Something that was harder to hear because it was less armored. "The dialysis center called this morning," she said. "Before you called me, I thought that was why you were calling at 2 in the morning. I thought something had happened with the machine. But they called to tell me my account was under review, that someone from a business office had been in contact. They used the word resolution." "Yeah," Wyatt said. "That was because of Frank Donovan. That was because of Dale Carver." A pause that lasted exactly long enough for Rose to be crying quietly and then stop. "Putting that gun down," she said finally. Her voice was very steady now. The kind of steady that comes after tears rather than before them. That was not a small thing. "Do not make it small." Wyatt looked at the desert sunset painting on the wall, still exhausted, but maybe a different kind of exhaustion. "I am going back to the diner at 10, he said. "I have got work to do." "I know," Rose said. "Call me when you are done." He knocked on Seth's door at 9:15. Seth opened it immediately. He had been awake clearly for a while. Same clothes, but his hair was damp, and his eyes were clearer than they had been in the parking lot the night before. Some fundamental cloudiness lifted. "You told your mom," Wyatt asked. "For an hour and 40 minutes, Seth said. She cried. I cried. She told me about 30 things my dad would have said." He picked up his jacket from the chair. "My dad used to say that the difference between a mistake and a crime is whether you thought it was someone else's problem to clean up." Seth said. "I always thought it was just something he said. Turns out he was just right." They drove back to the diner. The morning looked different than the night, the same road in the same parking lot, in the same building. But the light had changed. Everything made it more accountable, removed the dramatic mercy that darkness always extends. In the morning, you saw things as they actually were. The busted door frame, the 2 ceiling holes visible from the parking lot, the faded paint on the sign, the highway behind it carrying traffic that had no knowledge of what had happened here 6 hours ago. They stood in the parking lot for a moment looking at it. "We did that," Wyatt said. "We did," Seth said. "Yeah." The door opened before they reached it. Dottie was already there, different uniform, but the same quality of exhaustion, wearing cleaner clothes, and she had a cup of coffee in each hand and held them out without ceremony as they came through the door. "You are early," she said. "Could not sleep past 8, Wyatt said. "That is your body telling you it is time to start fixing things," Dottie said. She looked them both over with the eye of a woman who has been evaluating the condition of the people who walk through her door for 2 decades and has become very accurate at it. "You both look terrible," she said without unkindness. "Thank you," Seth said. "Supply closet is in the back. Mop bucket cleaning supplies. The light in the back booth has been flickering for 6 weeks. I would be grateful if someone looked at it while they are back there. Maintenance keeps saying they will get to it. There is a stepladder in the closet too," she added, "for the ceiling." Wyatt looked up at the 2 holes. In the morning light, they were worse than they had been at night. Ragged and dark-edged and ugly. The particular ugliness of damage that has had time to settle into what it is. "I can patch plaster," Wyatt said. "Not a finished job, but it will hold until a professional comes." "Good enough for today," Dottie said. Seth was already moving toward the supply closet with the energy of a man who needs to be busy before he has time to think too carefully about anything. Wyatt watched him and understood what was running him. Not guilt, not anymore. Something further along than guilt. the specific forward motion of a man who has decided that what he owes, he is going to pay. They worked. The work was good, physical and straightforward, and the kind that occupies the hands completely. Wyatt patched plaster working the stepladder with the practiced ease of someone who had done construction before and whose hands still knew how. Seth mopped every square foot of linoleum twice thorough beyond what anyone had asked. The back booth light was a loose ground wire, 10 minutes with a screwdriver. The morning breakfast crowd came in around 9:30. Regular people, highway traffic, a family with a small boy who kept pointing at the ceiling, patches with the directness of children who have not yet learned that pointing is rude. A pair of highway patrol officers who sat at the counter and talked to Dottie about something Wyatt could not hear, and who occasionally looked over at him and Seth with the professional interest of men trained to notice things that are slightly outside the ordinary. Wyatt kept his head down and worked. Around 10:15, the older of the two officers, maybe 55, thick through the shoulders, with the permanent slight squint of a man who has spent years looking at things from the outside of a patrol car, walked over to where Wyatt was cleaning under a table. "Son," he said. Wyatt straightened. "Morning, officer." The officer's name was Earl Riggs, and he had been with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department for 28 years, and he had a memory for faces that his colleagues called a gift, and that he thought of as simply the result of paying attention long enough. He recognized Wyatt Briggs. He had last seen him 3 years ago on the shoulder of Route 247 in the middle of the night after the funeral, when Wyatt had driven into a drainage ditch and been found by a passing motorist. The DUI had been Wyatt's only arrest. Earl had processed it himself. He looked at Wyatt now without showing any of this recognition. "Not yet." "Those patches up there," Earl said. "Those are new." "Yes, sir," Wyatt said. "What happened to the ceiling?" Wyatt met the officer's eyes. Earl Riggs's eyes were professionally neutral and personally curious in the specific combination that experienced officers develop the expression of someone who knows more than he is revealing and is waiting to see what you will reveal. "There was an incident last night," Wyatt said. "We are fixing it." "An incident?" Earl let the words sit for a moment. "You work here?" "No, sir. I am here making amends." Earl looked at him for a long time. The way experienced men look at things they are reading rather than just seeing. His gaze moved to Seth across the diner, came back to Wyatt. "Dottie," Earl called toward the counter. Dottie looked over. "These men causing you any trouble this morning?" Dottie set down the coffee carafe she was holding. "These men," she said with 22 years of authority behind each word, "are fixing my ceiling and mopping my floors, and they have been here since 9:15. I would call that the opposite of trouble." Earl looked at Wyatt one more time. Something in his expression withdrew. Not warmth exactly, but the specific absence of suspicion, which in Wyatt's current state felt almost identical. "Carry on," Earl said. He walked back to the counter. Wyatt released a breath he had not known he was holding. Seth materialized at his elbow. "Close," Seth murmured. "Not really," Wyatt said, but his hands had been shaking for the last 30 seconds. Earl Riggs sat at his counter, drinking his coffee and not leaving. Wyatt was aware of him the whole time, aware of being watched in the professional and thorough way that Earl watched things. It was not comfortable. It was the specific discomfort of a man who knows he is being assessed and does not know what the conclusion is going to be. At 11:45, the door opened and Dale Carver walked in. He was alone. No Colt, no Finn, no Knox. Just Dale in a plain jacket and jeans and boots, with no visible patches on anything, looking like any man in his mid-50s stopping for coffee on a Wednesday morning. He walked to the counter, ordered, and sat. He looked up at the ceiling patches. He looked at Wyatt. He gave a single nod. Wyatt nodded back. Dale drank his coffee and took his time and did not supervise or inspect. Wyatt understood immediately and with certainty that that was not why he was here. He was here the way a person shows up to something they said they would show up to, even when showing up is quiet and unremarkable, because that is what showing up means. After about 20 minutes, Dottie leaned across the counter and said something to Dale that Wyatt could not hear. Dale listened, said something back, and Dottie laughed. A real one, short and without any self-consciousness in it. The laugh of someone who has been given back a small piece of what last night took from her. Earl Riggs, at the end of the counter, watched Dale leave. Then he looked at Wyatt with an expression that had changed in some way Wyatt could not quite name. Not friendly, but different. Dale put money on this counter, stood and walked toward the door. He passed Wyatt's table. "You got a phone," he said without stopping. "Yeah," Wyatt said. "Check it." Dale walked out. Wyatt checked his phone. There was a text from Frank Donovan's number sent at 8 that morning. It contained a name, an address, and a time. 3 o'clock this afternoon. Below the time, a single line: he runs a crew. Good work. Steady pay. Tell him Dale sent you. Wyatt read it 3 times. He walked to where Seth was finishing the last stretch of floor. Seth, he said. Seth looked up. Wyatt held out the phone. Seth read it. His jaw tightened. He blinked twice. He handed the phone back. That is a job, Seth said. Looks like a real one, Wyatt said. Corey stood the mop against the wall. He stood with his arms at his sides and his face doing the series of rapid adjustments that Wyatt recognized from the inside because he had gone through the same sequence the night before. Disbelief, recalculation, the particular vertigo of a man whose operating model of how the world works has just been revised without his consent. Wyatt, Seth said. Why is this happening? I do not know, Wyatt said. I think because Dale Carver decided it should. But why? What does he get out of it? Wyatt thought about what Dale had said the night before about the room where someone chose to help instead of hurt, and it changed the shape of everything after. He thought about Knox in his 8 years. He thought about Frank Donovan saying he had been where Wyatt was once. I think some people do things, Wyatt said slowly, not because of what they get out of it. I think some people do things because of who they have decided to be. And being that person requires doing the thing, even when there is no angle. Seth considered this for a moment. I have never met anyone like that before, he said. Me neither, Wyatt said, until last night. They finished the work by 12:30. Every surface clean, every hole patched, the back booth light steady for the first time in months, the door frame as solid as Wyatt could make it with what he had available, which was more solid than it had any right to be. Dottie walked the whole diner with the careful eye of a woman checking whether something has been done right or only done. She stopped at the back booth and pressed the light switch twice. On, off, on, steady. She looked at Wyatt. 23 years, that light has been a problem, she said. Loose ground wire, Wyatt said. Common in booths this age, someone just needed to look at it. You do construction. I did, before the auto shop. Why did you stop? Wyatt thought about the real answer, which was long, and involved a boss who had not paid what he owed, and a series of decisions that had each seemed reasonable in isolation, and had added up to a situation that had no reasonable interpretation at all. Lost my way for a while, he said. Dottie nodded in the way of someone who has heard this particular answer enough times to know exactly what it means and what it costs to say it simply. She went to the register, counted something out, and came back and held it toward Wyatt. He looked at it. $300, 650s. Dottie, it is not for you, she said. It is for Rose. Put it toward the first payment. Wyatt looked at the money. You do not even know her, he said. I know enough, Dottie said. I know her brother spent a night making choices for her that almost went very wrong. And I know that when you call her tonight, she should hear that a stranger from Denny's Fork Diner on Interstate 40 sent her something. Because I want her to know that something good came out of that night. That it was not only bad. Wyatt took the money. His hand was not entirely steady. Thank you, he said, and he said it in the way you say things when the word is not large enough, but it is the only one you have. Don't thank me, Dottie said. Just be reliable. She went back to work. Seth was watching all of this from near the door, wearing the expression he had been carrying all morning. The face of a man absorbing information that is fundamentally rearranging something in his interior architecture. You know what gets me, Seth said as they walked out? What? Last night I thought the worst thing that could happen was getting caught. That was my biggest fear. Getting caught, getting locked up, losing the freedom to keep doing whatever I had been doing. He held the door for Wyatt, and the worst thing that happened was getting caught, and it turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. That is either profound, Wyatt said, or you hit your head harder than we thought. Probably both, Seth said. Wyatt laughed. The first real one he had produced in longer than he could accurately calculate. It came out rough and uncertain, like something that had been stored too long, but it was real and it was his. They stood by the truck. 3 o'clock, Wyatt said. 3 o'clock, Seth confirmed. You want company? You do not have to come. I know I do not have to, Seth said. He said it in the exact rhythm that Dottie had used. The cadence of a person who has decided that don't have to is no longer the operative question. Do you want company? Wyatt thought about walking into an unknown address to meet an unknown man sent by a stranger who had emerged from a diner robbery and changed the direction of his life. Yeah, Wyatt said. I want company. Then I am coming, Seth said. They got in the truck. Before Wyatt started the engine, his phone rang. Rose. He picked up. Leo, she said, and her voice had something in it he had not heard in a long time. A quality he associated with before the dialysis became the whole weight of their shared life before the bills had made every conversation a negotiation with scarcity. A lightness. Not happiness, quite not yet, but the sound of weight being temporarily set down. The dialysis center just called, again, she said. There is a payment plan, 6 months. Wyatt, I ran the numbers. These are numbers I can actually manage. I know. How? Dale Carver, Wyatt said. He made calls. Who is this man? Someone who stopped for coffee, Wyatt said, and decided to do more than that. Rose was quiet for a moment. Tell him she started. I do not know if I will see him again, Wyatt said. If you do, Rose said, tell him that Rose says thank you. Tell him that Rose says she is going to make sure this mattered, that her brother is going to make sure it mattered. He already knows, Wyatt said. I think that is exactly why he did it. He started the truck. There was a road in front of them and a time on his phone that said 3 o'clock and a name and an address, and somewhere west on the 44 men on motorcycles who had looked at 2 desperate people and decided what they deserved was not punishment, but the specific hard gift of consequences that pointed forward. The address on Wyatt's phone led them 40 minutes east of Barstow, down a county road that the truck's suspension had opinions about, to a construction yard where 3 crews were working simultaneously on a commercial foundation project of significant scale. The man they were looking for stood in the middle of organized chaos, with blueprints in one hand and a phone in the other, directing 2 different people at once, with the economy of motion of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. His name was Wade Keller. He was 60 years old, compact-weathered, deeply brown from decades of outdoor work, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead that he apparently never used for reading. He saw them coming and ended both conversations simultaneously, the way experienced men end things cleanly, no trailing words. He walked toward them. Wyatt Briggs, he said. Yes, sir, Wyatt said. Wade looked at him the way Dale had looked at him the night before. The specific assessment of a man taking the measure of a structural element, asking, will this hold weight? Dale called me this morning, Wade said. I figured, Wyatt said. He does not call often, Wade said. When he does, I listen. He told me you know construction. He told me you are at a turning point. He told me you would show up on time. He paused. You showed up 40 minutes early. I did not know the roads, Wyatt said. Good answer, Wade said. Bad roads still early. That tells me something. He looked at Seth. Who is this? Seth Holden. I am with him. You do construction. I do whatever needs doing. I am a fast learner. Wade studied Seth for 3 seconds. Dale mentioned you. No, sir, Seth said. So you just came. He needed company, Seth said simply, and I did not have anywhere better to be. Wade looked at Wyatt with something in his expression that was close to a smile but had not quite become one. He always liked this, Wyatt said. Honestly, Wyatt said, I am seeing a new side of him today. I have got a crew 2 men short, Wade said. Foundation work framing later in the week. Physical. Early mornings. It pays honest. If you are here Thursday at 6, you have got a job. Both of you. He looked specifically at Wyatt. Dale says you know plaster and electrical. Yes, sir. Then Thursday at 6, you are not on the foundation crew, Wade said. You are with Martinez on the interior team. Better rate. Wyatt felt something move through him that he did not immediately have a name for. Not relief. Relief was what you felt when a bad thing ended. This was something else. The feeling of a door opening in a wall. Thursday at 6, Wyatt said. We will be here. Wade nodded. He was already turning back to his work. Then he stopped. One thing he said without turning around. Yeah, Wyatt said. Whatever you did to get Dale Carver to call me at 8 in the morning, Wade said I do not need the details. But I need to know it is behind you. Wyatt did not hesitate. It is behind me, he said. Wade walked back into the organized chaos of his yard and was absorbed into it, back on the phone, blueprints rising in his hand, the working day closing around him like water. Corey stood next to Wyatt in the silence. Thursday at 6, Seth finally said. Thursday at 6, Wyatt confirmed. That is 2 days from now. I can count, Seth. I know, Seth said. I am just saying that 2 days ago I could not tell you what Thursday looked like. I could not see that far. And now I can. Wyatt put his hand briefly on Seth's shoulder. Let's go call our families, he said. They drove back toward Barstow, afternoon traffic on the 40, the desert doing its desert thing, And Wyatt drove with both hands on the wheel and a steadiness in his chest that he recognized after a moment as something he had not felt in a very long time. The feeling of a man who knows what the next 3 days look like. Not 3 months, not 3 years. Just Thursday at 6 Rose's payment arrangement, Dottie's $300 toward the first installment. Small and clear and concrete things lined up in sequence. That was enough. That turned out to be exactly enough. His phone rang. Frank Donovan's number. "Mr. Donovan," Wyatt said. "Mr. Briggs, I hear you went to see Wade." "Word travels fast," Wyatt said. "Wade texted me when you left," Frank said. He said, and I am quoting directly, "Dale's guys showed up early, answer straight, bringing him on Thursday." He paused. "I want you to understand what that means. Wade Keller has been in business for 30 years. He has never once hired a man he did not know personally or had not watched work firsthand. What Dale's endorsement did, what you showing up early and answering straight did, is something that does not happen on a normal Tuesday." "I understand that," Wyatt said. "Do you—" Frank's voice was not sharp. It was the genuine question of a man who wanted a real answer. "I need you to understand it specifically, not in general. What happened last night and what happened this morning and what happens Thursday, this is a chain. Each link holds because the one before it held. Dale vouched for you because you put the gun down. Wade hired you because Dale vouched. Every good thing that comes after Thursday exists because Wade gave you a chance. You break one link, the whole chain is gone." "Yes," Wyatt said, "I understand completely." "Good." Frank was quiet for a moment, and then with a directness that Wyatt was beginning to recognize as simply how this man communicated no performance, no softening. "Just the thing itself. I have a sister too, older. She raised me after our parents died. I was 15. She was 19 and she worked 2 jobs and she never once let me feel like I was a burden, not for a single day." A pause. "When you said Rose's name last night, Dale told me how you said it. I understood what kind of man was standing in that diner. The kind of man who still has someone he is fighting for. That kind of man is salvageable. Always." Wyatt's throat was doing the thing again. "Mr. Donovan," Wyatt said, "I do not know how to." "Don't," Frank said, not unkindly. "Do not try to thank me. Build something with what you have been given today. Build something real and lasting, and make sure Rose knows her brother is the man she always believed he was. That is all anyone can ask." The line went quiet. Seth was watching Wyatt from the passenger seat. "What did he say?" Seth asked. "He said build something," Wyatt said. Seth sat with that for a moment. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. Yeah." They drove, and then something neither of them expected around a long curve. On the eastbound 40, on the westbound shoulder, 4 motorcycles were parked in a row. Dale Carver, Colt Weaver, Finn Blackwood, and Knox Steele all standing outside their bikes, with helmets in hand, facing east, as if they had pulled over for a specific reason, and the reason was watching the road. Wyatt's hands tightened on the wheel. "Is that—" Seth started. "Yeah," Wyatt said. He pulled the truck to the eastbound shoulder, got out. The highway noise was constant between them, trucks and wind, and the Mojave enormous on all sides. Dale raised his hand across 40 feet of highway and a concrete median. Just raised it. Wyatt raised his. It was not quite a wave. It was something more specific and also simpler. The gesture of two people who have shared a room during something consequential and carry that room with them now, whether they intend to or not. Knox Hayes cupped his hands around his mouth. "Thursday at 6, he shouted across the traffic noise. Wyatt stared at him. "How do you know about that?" he shouted back. Knox grinned. It was the first grin Wyatt had seen from him, and it was unexpectedly good-wide and genuine, and belonging to a man who was considerably warmer than the controlled stillness of last night had suggested. "Ray's been our contractor for 12 years, Knox called back. "He texts us when interesting things happen." Wyatt laughed. He could not stop it. It came out of him like something pressurized, finding a release valve, real and uncontrolled and a little helpless. Seth was out of the truck now, and standing beside him, and Seth started laughing too. And for 30 seconds on the shoulder of Interstate 40 outside Barstow, California, two men who had driven into a night of terrible choices and come out the other side into the disorienting gift of second chances stood on a highway shoulder laughing at nothing and everything. Bobby Gallagher across the highway shook his head. He was smiling. Finn Reed put his helmet on. Dale looked at Wyatt one last time and did not shout. He just looked, And in that look, Wyatt received something he understood without needing words, the particular communication of a man who has passed something on and is releasing it. The way you let something go when you are certain it is in the right hands. Dale put his helmet on. One by one, the engine started that deep mechanical voice that Wyatt would not forget. And they pulled out westbound into the afternoon and into the Mojave, and Wyatt watched the four sets of taillights until they were small and then smaller, and then gone around the long curve of the highway. Seth put his hands in his pockets. You know what I keep thinking about, Seth said. What? Last night when I walked up to that booth with the shotgun and put the barrel on the table, Seth said slowly. I thought I was the one in charge of that moment. I thought I was the dangerous one. He shook his head. And the whole time they were just waiting, patient, waiting for me to make the next mistake so they could stop me from finishing what I had started. They were not trying to beat us, Seth said. They were trying to stop us from destroying ourselves. Those are not the same thing at all. No, Wyatt said. They are not. Seth looked at the empty stretch of westbound highway. They could have hurt us, he said, easily, and they didn't. They could have called the police and walked out, and they didn't do that either. I think Wyatt said because they have been somewhere like where we were. Not the same place, but near enough to recognize it. And somebody at some point made a choice for them. Or didn't, and they spent years wishing somebody had. He thought about Knox's 8 wasted years and what it had cost him to arrive at the place where stillness became natural. He thought about Frank Donovan at 15, an older sister, working 2 jobs. He thought about Dale pulled over on the highway at 3 in the morning, unable to simply ride past without thinking about the kid who had said a name. When you have been that close to the edge yourself, you do not see a criminal when someone else is standing there. You see the person underneath, the one who got to that edge. Seth was quiet for a long moment. My dad would have said something about that, he said finally, something better than I just said it. What would he have said? He used to say, Seth said slowly, that the only debt worth carrying is the one you pay forward. That anything someone gives you out of genuine grace, you cannot pay it back because it does not belong to that transaction. You carry it until you meet the next person at the edge, and you pay it there. Wyatt looked at him. Your dad said that. He also said a lot of things about engine maintenance that were less useful, Seth said. But yeah, he said that. Then we know what we owe, Wyatt said. Yeah, Seth said, we do. They got back in the truck. Wyatt called Rose. She answered before the first ring finished. Well, she said, tell me everything. He told her. The construction yard weighed Keller Thursday at 6 the highway shoulder and 4 motorcycles and Knox Steel shouting across traffic about contractors who sent texts when interesting things happened. He told her all of it. Rose listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Rose, who was constitutionally incapable of non-participatory listening. She let him get through all of it, and when he finished, she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Thursday at 6, she said. Thursday at 6, and Seth is going too. Seth is going too. A breath. Okay. Wyatt, I need you to hear something. I am listening. Whatever happens Thursday, Rose said. And after Thursday, and a year from now, and 10 years from now, I need you to remember that last night you put a gun down when you did not have to. When everything in that moment it was telling you not to. When 41 hours of no sleep and every fear you had was telling you to hold on to it. You put it down anyway. Knox told me to, Wyatt said. Lots of people tell us things, Rose said firmly. We choose which ones we hear. You heard the right one. Remember that when it gets hard later. And it is going to get hard later. That is just what life does. But you already proved something about yourself in that diner. You already showed yourself who you can be when it counts. Wyatt's eyes were stinging. He was apparently going to be in this condition indefinitely. Clara, he said. Yeah, Dottie from the diner sent you $300 toward the first payment. A silence. She what? She said she wants you to know something good came out of that night. That it was not only bad. Rose made a sound that was not a word and not a cry and was somewhere between them. Wyatt sat with it because some sounds do not need a response. They just need to be received. Tell her, Rose said when she could speak again. Tell her I said it already mattered. It already meant something. I will, Wyatt said. He hung up. Seth was looking out at the passenger the window. His face had the settled, thoughtful quality it had been carrying all day. A man rearranging furniture inside himself to make room for new information. You know what we should do, Seth said. What? Wednesday, Seth said. Before Thursday, We should go back to the diner just for coffee. Sit down, drink it slow, tip Dottie well. Be people who stop at a diner for coffee like normal people. Wyatt considered this. That is actually a good idea, he said. I have them occasionally, Seth said. More than occasionally now, I think, Wyatt said. They drove back toward Barstow. The highway was straight, and the afternoon was clean and bright, and the desert on both sides held its silence, the full silence of a place that has witnessed everything and retained all of it. Somewhere on the highway behind them, Denny's Fork Diner stood with its patched ceiling and its steady back booth light and its register balanced to the last dollar, Dottie moving between tables with 22 years of practiced attention. A diner that had been the site of something that most diners on most nights never witnessed, the moment when two roads diverge inside a human being, and the human being barely chooses the right one. And Wednesday evening in room 7 of the Sunrise Motor Lodge, just before he fell asleep, Wyatt Briggs received a text from an unknown number he did not recognize. Not Frank Donovan. Not anyone he had spoken to. The text was 3 words, Earl Riggs here. Followed immediately by a second text. We need to talk before Thursday. Not what you think. Be at the diner at 7 a.m. Wyatt read it twice. Set the phone down. Picked it up. Read it again. He set it face down on the nightstand and lay back in the dark and tried to figure out how Deputy Earl Riggs had gotten his number and what it was that Earl Riggs thought it was not. Wyatt arrived at Denny's Fork Diner at 6:53 Wednesday morning. He had not slept well. The text from Earl Riggs had sat in his chest all night like a stone, not because it was threatening, but because it was unknown, and unknown things in the current architecture of Wyatt's life had a specific weight that familiar things no longer carried. Dottie unlocked the door when she saw him in the parking lot and let him in without ceremony. The diner was empty, chairs still on tables, the smell of last night's cleaning still in the air underneath the first pot of coffee that was just beginning to push through. You are early again, Dottie said. I seem to be developing a habit, Wyatt said. She poured him a cup without asking, and he sat at the counter and drank it, and they were quiet together for a few minutes in the particular comfortable way that certain spaces and certain people allow. Someone named Earl Riggs texted me last night, Wyatt said. Dottie set down the second coffee carafe. Earl, she said. She did not say anything else for a moment. He and I have history, Wyatt said. Not good history. I know about the DUI, Dottie said. Earl mentioned it once a while back. He did not say it unkindly. Wyatt looked at her. Earl stops in most mornings, Dottie said. Has for 15 years. He sits at that stool. She nodded toward the far end of the counter, and he drinks 2 cups, and sometimes he talks, and sometimes he does not. She picked up a cloth and began wiping down the counter in the slow, methodical way of someone occupying her hands while her mind is elsewhere. He is not a man who forgets things, but he is also not a man who uses what he remembers to hurt people. There is a difference between those two things. Wyatt thought about that. Yeah, he said, I am starting to understand that. The door opened at 7:02. Earl Riggs came in, not in uniform, jeans and a work jacket, the off-duty look of a man who wanted this to be a different kind of conversation than the ones he had at the counter in uniform. He sat down 2 stools from Wyatt. Dottie put a cup in front of him without being asked. Wyatt, Earl said. Deputy Wyatt said. Earl said, I am not here as a deputy. He wrapped both hands around the cup. Dottie moved to the far end of the counter with the intuition of a woman who understands when a conversation requires space. How did you get my number? Wyatt asked. Frank Donovan, Earl said. Wyatt stared at him. You know Frank Donovan. I have known Frank Donovan for 20 years, Earl said. He was quiet for a moment, looking into his coffee. Frank Donovan helped me out of a situation once, long before I was a deputy, long before I had any particular claim on being the kind of man who sits on this side of any situation. He paused. I am not going to tell you the details because they are not relevant and because I do not owe you my history. But I want you to understand that the network you stumbled into 2 nights ago is not a casual thing. It is not something Dale Carver built by himself or that Frank Donovan runs like a business. It is people. People who were helped and who paid it forward and who built something over a long time that does not have a name because the people in it never needed to name it. Wyatt was very still. When Dale called Frank Monday night, Earl said Frank called me, not to turn you in, to ask me what I knew about you, and I told him what I knew, which was not much, a DU. 3 years ago on the night of your mother's funeral, a man who was in serious pain and made a bad decision about how to manage what, which is a very specific kind of bad decision that I have a lot of experience with. He looked at Wyatt directly for the first time. I did not do you any favors that night, he said. I processed it by the book. And I have thought about that more than once in the 3 years since. Wyatt did not say anything. I ran Danny Sloan yesterday, Earl said, through the Arizona database. Danny Sloan has 3 outstanding warrants in Maricopa County. Assault fraud weapons charge. I flagged his plates and contacted my counterpart in Needles. When Danny crossed the California-Arizona state line early this morning, he was stopped and detained. He is currently in custody in Needles awaiting extradition to Arizona. Wyatt set down his coffee cup. That is separate from anything Frank did, Earl said. That is just me doing my job, which I could have done 2 nights ago and did not, and which I am doing now because it needed doing, and because you are trying to build something here, and you should not have to do that with Danny Sloan's shadow over it. Why are you telling me this? Wyatt asked. Because you deserve to know that part of the road is clear, Earl said. And because Frank asked me to make sure you understood that the people around you right now are not going anywhere. He picked up his coffee. That is all I came to say. He drank. Wyatt sat with everything Earl had just told him. Danny Sloan in custody in Arizona, Earl Riggs and Frank Donovan's network. The thing he had stumbled into, the thing he still did not have a name for extending in directions he could not see from where he was sitting. Earl, Wyatt said. Earl looked over. The night of the DUI, after you processed me. He stopped. I was in bad shape. I was not a person who was dealing with things well. You processed me by the book, and you were correct to do that. But he stopped again. I know, Earl said simply. I know you were. They sat in a companionable silence for a few minutes. Dottie refilled both cups without being asked and went back to her end of the counter. Outside, the first light of a Wednesday morning is doing what Mojave Light does, arriving with full confidence and no hesitation. I am going to start Thursday at 6, Wyatt said. I know, Earl said. Wade texted me too. Wyatt laughed despite himself. Does everyone in the desert text each other about everything? Only about things that matter, Earl said. He stood left money on the counter and buttoned his jacket. He looked at Wyatt one last time with the expression of a man who has put something down that he has been carrying for a while. Carry on, he said. He walked out. Dottie came back down the counter. She was smiling. 22 years, she said. Earl Riggs has been sitting at that stool for 15 of them, and I have never seen him initiate a conversation with anyone before they put their coffee down. She picked up Earl's cup. That is how I know he meant it. Wyatt looked at the empty stool. Yeah, he said. I think he did. Seth arrived at 8:15. He came in with the purposeful ease of a man who has decided what his day is going to look like and is proceeding accordingly. He sat down next to Wyatt, accepted the coffee Dottie automatically provided, and said Danny Sloan is in custody in Arizona. You heard, Wyatt said. Got a text from Frank this morning, Seth said. He paused. You know what is strange? He looked at the coffee cup. A week ago, if someone had told me my debt was canceled and the guy I owed was in jail, I would have felt relieved, like I had gotten away with something. He shook his head. Right now, I just feel like I have got work to do and I want to do it right. That is a different feeling. That is a different person, Wyatt said. Maybe Seth said. Maybe that is the same thing. They sat at the counter and drank their coffee and watched Denny's Fork Diner wake up around them. The breakfast regulars arriving one by one, truckers and early risers and a family who were clearly passing through and who looked at everything with the slightly bewildered attention of people encountering an unfamiliar landscape. A normal Wednesday morning. The kind of morning that had been happening in this diner every day for as long as it had been here. The ordinary, unremarkable business of people eating and drinking and pausing in their traveling. That evening, driving back from Barstow to the motel, Wyatt pulled over on the highway shoulder and called Rose. They talked for an hour. Not about dialysis, not about money, about their mother Janelle, who had died when Wyatt was 26 and Rose was 29, of the slow particular lung cancer that took its time about everything. About the way their mother used to sing off key at the stove and never seemed to notice or care. About the summer when Wyatt was 12 and Rose was 15, and they had built a terrible go-kart in the backyard from their father's spare parts, and it had actually worked barely for exactly one lap around the yard before a wheel came off. Rose laughed at that story the way she had not laughed in months from somewhere real and unguarded. And Wyatt held the phone and listened to his sister's laugh and thought about all the dialysis sessions it had taken to get here, and all the ones that still lay ahead, and the payment arrangement, and the 6 months, and the work that started tomorrow morning and the chain of links that held because each one had held. Rose, he said before they hung up, I should have called you 6 weeks ago when the first notice came. I should have called you instead. Yes, she said. You should have. I'm going to call you from now on, every time. You had better, she said, because I will call you first if you don't, and I will keep calling until you answer. Good, Wyatt said. Good, Rose said. After they hung up, he sat for a while on the shoulder of the 40 with the engine running and the desert dark around him and the stars doing what they do over the Mojave. And he thought about his father who had died when Wyatt was 19, and about Janelle and about Rose at 19, just the two of them in the house with the bills and the grief, and he thought, you have been alone when you did not have to be for a very long time. That ends now. He put the truck in gear and drove. Thursday came early and clear. Wyatt Briggs showed up at Wade Keller's construction yard at 5:47 in the morning. Seth Holden was already there standing by the gate with 2 coffees, one of which he held out without a word because some things had stopped needing words between them. Wade arrived at 5:59, saw them both at the gate and nodded once. Good start, he said. He unlocked the gate and they walked in, and the workday began. It was physical work, honest work, the kind that occupied the body completely and gave the mind room to do its quiet processing in the background. Wyatt worked alongside a man named Martinez, who ran the interior team, a compact, careful man of 50, who spoke in efficient instructions and evaluated new crew members not by what they said, but by what they did. By 10 in the morning, Wyatt had apparently passed some threshold Martinez held because the instructions became less frequent and the work became more collaborative. 2 men who understood each other through the grammar of construction. At noon, Wyatt stepped out and called Dottie. First day, he said. I know, Dottie said. Wade already texted me. Wyatt laughed. Is everyone in the Mojave in contact with everyone else all the time? Only about the things that matter, Dottie said. And then, how is it? It is good, Wyatt said. And he meant it with the full, uncomplicated weight of those 2 words without qualification or reservation. It is really good. Yeah, Dottie said. It is. She hung up. At the end of the day, as the crews were packing up, Wade stopped by where Wyatt was finishing a wall repair. Martinez says, you know what you're doing, Wade said. I used to, Wyatt said. Seems like it is coming back. Skills like that do not leave, Wade said. They wait. He looked at the repair Wyatt had done. That is good work. He walked away. Seth was waiting at the truck. They drove back toward Barstow in the early dusk, the highway stretching ahead, the desert going gold on both sides in the last of the light. It was a Thursday, Wyatt said. Yeah, Seth said. It was. In the weeks that followed, the construction work held. Wade Keller was not a man who gave compliments freely, but he was a man who gave responsibility, and he gave it to the people who had demonstrated they could carry it. By the end of the first month, Wyatt was running the interior team on a second project while Martinez worked the first. Seth was on foundation crew and had the specific quality that Wade valued above everything else. He showed up every morning on time, and he worked until the work was done. One afternoon in the 3rd week, Frank Donovan called. Mr. Briggs, Frank said. How is it going? Good, Wyatt said. Genuinely good. There is something you should know, Frank said. The context for why I was able to do what I did the other night. I told you you do not have to, Wyatt said. I know I do not have to, Frank said. I want to. It matters. 30 years ago, Frank said I was 22 years old and I was in a situation that had no good exit. I will not detail the specifics. What I will tell you is that a man named Raymond Hollis made a call on a Tuesday morning, and that call changed the direction of my life. Raymond Hollis has been dead for 18 years. I have never been able to pay him back directly. What I do is pay forward. What Dale does. What Earl does in his way. What Wade does by hiring men that Mike Callahan vouches for. Frank paused. Raymond used to say that the only grace worth having is the kind you cannot earn, he said. You cannot earn what was done for you the other night. It was never meant to be earned. It was meant to be received. And then when the time came, extended to the next person who needed it. That was Raymond's whole philosophy. That was the entire point. Wyatt sat with that for a moment. The whole transaction, he said. The whole thing, Frank said. Good luck, Mr. Briggs. He hung up. That evening, Wyatt bought a new notebook at the gas station in Barstow. A spiral-bound one, the kind he had used for estimates and measurements when he was working construction the first time around. He sat at the table in his motel room and opened to the first page and wrote at the top things I know how to do. Below that, he started a list. Plaster repair, ground wire, framework, rough electrical, drywall, tile, and then below the technical entries he wrote call Rose. Tell the truth, show up early. He looked at the list for a long time. Then he turned to the second page and wrote things I am learning. He left the rest of that page blank. 6 months after the night at Denny's Fork Diner, Rose Briggs completed her 112th dialysis treatment. She called Wyatt afterward, as she always did, from the chair before the nurse took the needle out, because she had decided early on that the way to make peace with a thing you had to do 3 times a week indefinitely was to make it into something that connected you to someone you loved, rather than something that merely kept you alive. Wyatt always answered. He had answered every call for 6 months, and he would answer for as long as she needed to call. The payment arrangement had held. The numbers had stayed manageable. There had been 1 month where the numbers had been very tight, where the math had required conversations and adjustments and a call to the billing office at the dialysis center, and Wyatt had made that call himself and explained the situation plainly, and the billing office had made an adjustment. He had not panicked. He had not made any calculations at midnight in parking lots. He had called the people who could help him and told them the truth, and it had worked. Seth Holden was promoted to site lead on a residential project in Apple Valley 6 months after starting with Wade's crew. Wade's announcement had been characteristically brief. You show up, you do the work. That is the whole job description. Seth had called Wyatt immediately. He had called his mother an hour later, and she had cried, and he had let her because he understood now that letting people love you properly was not weakness, but its own form of courage. In the autumn of that year, on a Saturday afternoon when the Mojave was doing the thing it does in October, when the heat finally relents and the light goes amber, and the desert becomes something almost gentle, Wyatt was driving back from a job in Victorville when he came around a curve on Route 247 and saw a car stopped on the shoulder with its hazard lights on. He pulled over. The car was a 10-year-old Civic, and it had a flat tire, and the couple standing beside it were maybe 25, both of them looking at the tire with the specific expression of people who knew what the problem was and had no idea how to address it. The man had a jack out of the trunk and was reading the instructions. Wyatt pulled in behind them and got out. You got a spare, he said. Yes, sir, the man said. He looked up with the wary courtesy of a young person deciding whether an older stranger stopping on the side of the road was an asset or a complication. Wyatt looked at the tire, then at the jack. 5 minutes, he said. Give me the lug wrench. The man handed it over. The woman moved out of the way. Wyatt worked quite quickly and without conversation, loosening the nuts in the correct sequence, positioning the jack at the frame point, lifting the car, pulling the flat. The spare went on. He lowered the car, torqued, the nuts stood up. Pump it up when you get to a station, he said. That spare will do for now, but you want a proper tire before you go more than 50 miles. Thank you, the woman said. How much do we owe you? Nothing, Wyatt said. He walked back to his truck. He was halfway to the door when the man called after him. Sir. Hey. Wyatt turned. The man looked at him across the gap, the low October sun behind them, the desert going amber in every direction. Why, the man said, you don't even know us. Wyatt thought about that for a moment. Someone did something for me once he said that I could not pay back. So I am paying it forward. He got in the truck and drove. In the months that followed, other things accumulated in the way that things accumulate when a man is building deliberately rather than stumbling. Wyatt moved out of the Sunrise Motor Lodge into an apartment in Victorville near the job sites. 2 bedrooms, which was more than he needed, but Rose visited twice and having the space mattered. He bought a used truck to replace the borrowed one. He enrolled in a continuing education class at Victor Valley College on construction management because Wade had mentioned once in passing, the way Wade mentioned all important things, that the men who moved up in this field were the ones who understood the business side as well as the work side. He went back to Denny's Fork Diner every other Wednesday for coffee, always sat at the counter, always tipped Dottie well. She always had the coffee poured before he was fully through the door. One Wednesday in January, almost exactly 7 months after the night Earl Riggs was there when Wyatt arrived, they sat 3 stools apart and drank their coffee, and Dottie moved between them with the easy authority of a woman managing the particular social geography of her counter. You know, Earl said, after a while without looking over. Yeah, Wyatt said. I have been sitting at this counter for 15 years, Earl said. Seen a lot of people come through, a lot of situations. He picked up his cup. You are one of maybe 4 or 5 people in that whole time that I have actually watched change. He paused. Most people stay who they are, not because they cannot change, because they never actually arrive at the place where they understand that they have to. You arrived there. Wyatt thought about the diner in September, the plaster dust and the revolver on the Formica and the four men who would not lie down. He thought about how close it had all come to going a different way. I had help, Wyatt said. You took the help, Earl said. That matters as much, more some days. He stood, put money on the counter, buttoned his jacket. The way he always left, no trailing words, just the thing done and finished. Wyatt sat for a while after Earl left, just drinking his coffee in the diner that had been the site of the worst decision he had ever made, and on the same night, the best. On the counter near the register, he could see the thing, and Dottie had kept the small piece of Amali's order paper in his handwriting. Rose says it already mattered. It already meant something. Thank you for making sure something good came out of that night. Dottie had laminated it at some point, he noticed. Protected it. Given it the permanence of something worth keeping. He had never asked her to do that. She had simply done it. He left enough money on the counter to cover the coffee twice over, and went out to the parking lot and stood for a moment in the January Mojave cold, which was a different thing from the September Mojave cold, quieter and cleaner, and with more of the sky in it. He could see the repair on the diner's exterior, the door frame that Arthur had fixed in October, professional work seamless. If you did not know there had been a door frame to fix, you would never know there had been anything to fix. That was probably true of a lot of things, he thought. He got in his truck. He had a job site to get to. In spring on a Thursday that felt like all the other Thursdays, in that it began before full light and ended after it. Wyatt finished a long day of interior work on a commercial project in Hesperia and drove back toward Victorville on the 40 and came up on the long stretch of highway where 7 months earlier, 4 sets of taillights had gone around a curve and disappeared into the desert. He thought about Dale Carver. He thought about whether Dale was out there somewhere on the same highway tonight or on a different one. The easy certainty of a man who travels without destination, because the destination was never the point. He thought about what Frank Donovan had said: you were not supposed to earn it. You were supposed to receive it and become someone who could do the same thing for the next person. He thought, I am trying. He did not know if he would see Dale Carver again. He thought probably he would not, or not soon, that men like Dale move through lives without announcing their arrivals or their departures, appearing when something required them and leaving when it was done. But he also thought that this was not the kind of thing you forgot. This was not the kind of night that faded. This was a room you carried with you the way Dale had said certain rooms traveled with you, and the carrying was not a burden. It was structure, the invisible load-bearing element that held everything else in place. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. Seth. He picked it up. Yeah, you hear, Seth said. He sounded like himself, which was Seth sounding like someone who had been surprised and had decided the surprise was good. Hear what? Rose. She called me an hour ago. She is coming out for a visit. End of the month. Wyatt smiled. Yeah, he said. She told me this morning. She said she wants to see where you work, Seth said. She wants to see the job site. Tell her to wear boots, Wyatt said. The foundation on the Hesperia project is still raw concrete. I already told her that, Seth said. She already knew. She said she looked it up. He paused. She also said she wants to buy Dottie lunch and tell her in person what the $300 meant. Wyatt drove and let that settle. The highway was straight and lit by his headlights, and the Mojave was enormous and dark on both sides, patient in the way that old things are patient. Tell her Dottie would like that, he said. I think Dottie would like that a lot. Yeah, Seth said. I think so too. He hung up. Wyatt drove the 40 east toward Victorville, with both hands on the wheel and a steadiness in his chest that had become something he recognized as simply his now. Not remarkable, not temporary, not a gift he was afraid of losing, just the ordinary daily fact of a man who knew what tomorrow looked like, and the day after that, and who had enough faith in the structure he was building to trust that it would hold. He had put a gun down on a Tuesday night in September. He had said a name. He had told the truth. These were not large things in the accounting of the world. They were not the kinds of things that got written down anywhere, or that anyone outside a small number of people would ever know about. But they were real, and they were his, and they had been the first links in a chain that now extended in both directions, backward into the night at Denny's Fork Diner, and forward into the construction yard, and the apartment in Victorville, and the notebook with its growing list, and the phone calls with Rose every time she got off the machine, And the Wednesdays at the counter and all the rest of it, all the ordinary, particular accumulation of a life that was being built from something real. Some debts cannot be paid back. They can only be paid forward again and again until the original act of grace has traveled so far from its source that it is no longer traceable but is present everywhere in the shape of a community that shows up, that fixes what it breaks, that says names out loud like they matter. In Denny's Fork Diner on Interstate 40 outside Barstow, the ceiling was solid and the back booth light was steady, and the register balanced every night to the last dollar. Dottie Mercer had worked that counter for 23 years now, and she had seen a great many things, and she had kept on the counter near the register a small laminated piece of order paper with 3 lines of handwriting on it that she had never explained to anyone who asked and did not need to. Earl Riggs still sat at the far stool most mornings. Wade Keller still showed up at 5:59. Frank Donovan still answered his phone in the hours after midnight when someone in a desperate place made the second choice. And somewhere on the 40 at a speed that was perfectly legal and entirely unhurried, 89 men of the Iron Covenant rode the highway the way they always had, carrying nothing that required an audience and needing nothing that required explanation, simply present in the particular way of people who have decided what they are for and who keep deciding it every morning. The most powerful thing Wyatt Briggs had put down on that Tuesday night was not the revolver. It was the story he had been telling himself about who he was and what he was worth, and what the world owed him and what he owed it. He had put that story down on a formica table in a diner in Barstow and walked away from it and never picked it up again. And in its place, he had picked up something else. Not a name for it, not yet, maybe never. Just the daily work of becoming a man his sister did not have to worry about. The daily work of showing up early and answering straight and calling the people who needed to be called before the desperation arrived. The daily work of being, as Frank Donovan had said, the kind of man who made the second call first. That was the whole job description. That was it, turned out more than enough. Rose came at the end of the month on a Friday afternoon when the desert was warm and the sky was the specific blue that only appears over the Mojave in spring, a blue that seems to come from inside the atmosphere rather than above it. Wyatt picked her up at the Barstow Amtrak station. She came off the train with a rolling bag in the particular determined walk of a woman who has been told she should be tired, but has decided she is not, and she hugged him with the full force of someone who has been wanting to do exactly this for months and is not going to perform moderation about it. "You look better," she said, than what Wyatt said, "than the last time I saw you. That was 14 months ago at Christmas." "I know," she said. "You still look better." Seth met them at the diner at 7. Dottie was working the dinner shift, which she had been doing again since hiring a second waitress, who had promptly gotten pregnant and needed lighter duties. Dottie saw them come through the door, and her face did something specific and unguarded that Wyatt had never seen on it before. Rose walked straight to the counter. The two women looked at each other for a moment. "You are Rose," Dottie said. "You are Dottie," Rose said. Rose reached across the counter and took Dottie's hands in hers and held them. "The $300, Rose said. The room at the Sunrise Motor Lodge. The way you let my brother come back here and fix what he broke." She stopped. "I have been wanting to say this to you in person since September. Thank you, not for saving him, because I think he saved himself. He just needed someone to give him the space to do it. But for being the person who gave him that space when you had every reason not to." Dottie looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes were bright. "I have a brother too," Dottie said. "Older. He is in Phoenix. We do not talk as much as we should." She paused. "When your brother came back the next morning, when I watched him work, I thought about my brother. I thought about what it would mean to someone in his life if someone gave him that space." She looked at Rose steadily. "That is why I gave it." Rose nodded once. She let go of Dottie's hands. They sat down at the counter, all three of them, and Dottie poured coffee without being asked, and they talked for 2 hours about construction and dialysis and the February weather in Barstow, and Seth's promotion, and the notebook Wyatt had started, and the community college class he had almost finished. And the talking was easy and real, and full of the particular quality of conversations that happen between people who have earned their way to the table. At the end of the meal, Rose left a tip that made Dottie look at it and then look at Rose. "That is too much," Dottie said. "The $300, Rose said, with interest." She smiled. "It is not enough, actually, but it is what I have right now." "It is too much," Dottie said again, but she did not give it back. Walking to the car in the parking lot, Rose stopped and looked up at the two patches in the ceiling, visible through the window in the spill of diner light. He patched those himself, Wyatt said. I know, Rose said. You told me. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the patched ceiling, the imperfect repair that had held for 7 months and was by any practical measure sufficient. He told me you could tell they were patches if you looked directly at them. She paused. You can only tell if you already know to look. Yeah, Wyatt said. That is something, Rose said. She looked at him. That is actually something. They drove to the motel. Not the Sunrise, which had closed in November, but a newer place on the frontage road that smelled like fresh carpet and had a painting of the mountains in the room instead of a desert sunset, which Wyatt thought was an improvement. Rose sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him across the room and said, Do you remember when we built the go-kart? Yeah, Wyatt said, one lap. Before the wheel came off, she said. Before the wheel came off, it worked. It actually worked. Yeah, Wyatt said. Rose looked at her hands. Mom was in the backyard watching, she said. She never said a word about whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. She just watched. And when the wheel came off and the whole thing tilted over and we both got dumped in the grass, she laughed. Not at us. With us. She laughed like it was the best thing she had seen all year. Wyatt was quiet. I think about her a lot lately, Rose said. More than I used to. I think about what she would have said about all of this, the whole thing September. What do you think she would have said? Rose thought about it. I think she would have said, the wheel came off, but you are still here. She paused. And then she would have made you tell her every single detail of the night because she would have wanted to know exactly what four men who ride motorcycles look like when they are not scared. Wyatt laughed. Yeah, he said. She would have wanted to know that. Rose smiled. She would have liked Dale Carver, I think. She always had a thing for men who were calm. Wyatt thought about Dale's coffee cup turning in a slow circle on the table. The specific gravity of a man who had decided a long time ago what he was for and kept deciding it. Yeah, he said. I think she would have. They sat in the quiet of the motel room for a while, the two of them, the only family they had, and the quiet was good, not empty. Full in the way the Mojave Desert at night was full, holding everything it had ever witnessed. Outside on the 40, a truck moved east through the dark, and then another. The highway's night traffic, the country's steady circulation heading somewhere, was something the way it always was. And somewhere out there in the dark, on roads that had no particular destination and required none, 89 men of the Iron Covenant rode their own routes unhurried and unannounced, carrying the specific quiet authority of people who had long since stopped needing an audience for the things they chose to do. They would not be back. Or they would. It did not matter which. What Dale Carver had given Wyatt Briggs on a Tuesday night in September was not a promise of presence. It was a demonstration of what presence looked like, what choosing to show up looked like, what stillness in a room full of chaos looked like from someone who had earned it rather than performed it. Wyatt Briggs was 31 years old and had a sister and a boy and a notebook with a growing list and a Wednesday counter stool and a chain of links that held because each one had held, and the first one had held because he had put a gun down on a Formica table when everything in him was telling him not to. It was enough. It was in fact more than enough. It was the whole thing.